Ben.
Chezi.
So how have you been? How was Pesach?
Pesach was good. Baruch Hashem, it was nice. Nice to see family.
Indeed. How was the Seder?
Seder was very cute. Lots of kids. It was interesting to have everybody. Had fun. How was yours? It was Naftali's first Seder, so that was also interesting.
That's very, very nice. I'm sure he couldn't. There's always parents that are convinced that their 1-year-old could sing the Manishtana, and they force everyone else to be like, no, he could do it. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
son is barely conscious.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. It's always fun to get together with family. I've been doing it with my in-laws for the last few years, and my kids were younger, so we were sort of it's a smaller family. We went through it fairly quickly. But as my kids have gotten older, hello Gilad. As my kids have gotten older, they they want to participate more and do more things. So it was actually nice to see them getting more involved.
That's cool.
Indeed, it was very, very nice. I try to bring in some archaeological, historical sort of elements as well to explain to the kids of how to look at Egypt and how Egypt today. My son was asking me about the pyramids. They have that whole thing going online with what they found underneath the pyramids. Mm-hmm. So he's like, did we build that? I was like, no, we didn't build that. We didn't build the pyramids. But it was very nice, and it was very nice to just be on Chol Moed, just off the grid. I check my phone in the morning, and then once again at night, and the rest of the day I'm just off my phone the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just hiking with the kids, swimming, relaxing, just walking and talking. It's it's very, I'm very, very, thank God, I'm very, very blessed. I had the opportunity to just to walk for a few hours, with my son, in a field is it's something that's very important to me when I get the time to do that, because during the week it's, not really there. So thank God, it was very nice. Mm-hmm. What about you, Gilad? You had a good Pesach?
Yeah, overall it was nice. Excluding the things that weren't so nice, it was nice.
Excluding the things that were not so nice.
Everything happens on the Seder table.
Just a second.
Hello, Ron.
Hi, how you doing?
Thank God. How are you doing, sir? Who are you?
I'm invited by Gilad.
Hi, it's a gift. All right.
Hi, Ron. Welcome.
Hi. We're happy to have you here. I hope you had an enjoyable Pesach as well.
Oh yes, very much. Very much.
Gilad was saying that it was enjoyable, but then the enjoyable stuff were great. The less enjoyable stuff, alluding to sort of our state as a country, and hopefully, after all these years of escaping and removing the shackles of other enemies, whether it's the Crusaders or the Egyptians or the Babylonians, hopefully this year we will learn to remove the shackles from ourselves, whether it's our own government or our own leaders, our own mindsets, and emerge new and actually free. So really, with the help of God and the help of the people, Israel of 2025 will emerge glorious. But we will see. There's still much work to be done in our country.
Amen.
Okay. So just going back a little, what we were talking about. Can you scroll back for a second, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Yaakov. Okay, and the Mechitzot. Okay. So we were again. Rambam is talking about prophecy over here. As we spoke about earlier, that he talks a lot about prophecy over here, and he says he's going to write the book about prophecy, but ultimately that turns into the Guide of the Perplexed, the Moreh Nevuchim. I mean, it's not all about prophecy, but that's where he elaborates more on that. So if anyone's interested to go deeper into that topic, of course, you could go there as well. But he gives examples how certain traits could create a veil for prophecy, right? So he gives an example of Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi, right? That obviously has this issue of kana'ut. There's this, this terrifying and beautiful scene. He tells Elijah to come meet him at Har Chorev, and Elijah comes up, and then he tells him, Malach hakan Eliyahu, like, what are you doing over here? And Elijah's answer should be like, well, you told me to come here. But God is actually asking, like, do you know what your purpose is? You understand, like, I'm asking you to be a messenger. I need you to be even sort of, in a certain sense, sort of like a father figure, not like a general in the army, right? And he is sort of punished in a certain way to be the redeemer, right? He ultimately has to come back when the Messiah comes and recognize that the complaints he had on the fathers, like we say, Pirkei Avot banim, the things he had on the fathers, he's going to have to realize that the sons, us, our generation, our kids' generation, are living a very different world, and there needs to be a lot more wiggle room and understanding. And of course, God saw that weakness in himself, and not in himself, in Elijah, and he was limited because of prophecy. We spoke about Jacob also, how his fear of fighting with Esau. We gave different interpretations what that fight with Esau is, but the idea was that there was a lack of trust in God if you have this fear, and that again creates a separation between you and God. And lastly, we spoke about these other Nevi'im, where we talked about these different veils, and I believe we gave an example of like even in whether it's in mathematics or in physics, that you can look at a world through a certain prism, but if that's all you know, if that's the only architecture you know, you can't see sort of further than that. And as we discover more things, and once quantum comes in, so suddenly we can see a lot more of the world. But until you get there are these veils in front of us, and some of these veils are due to a person's intellectual capability, but some of them have to do also with these veils that we put onto ourselves, right? If we're lacking in these traits, we have these issues. And we are going to continue in with the next portion, I believe, which Gilad, do you want to take a chance on reading this?
No problem.
Take it away. That's, I believe, where we stopped off. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay.
ולא תרחיק היות חיסרון, after the מחיצה.
ולא תרחיק היות חיסרון קצת המידות ממעט ממדרגת הנבואה, שאנחנו מצינו קצת פחיתות המידות ימנעו הנבואה לגמרי ככעס. אמרו, כל הכועס אם נביא הוא נבואתו מסתלקת ממנו. והביאו ראיה מאלישע שנסתלקה ממנו הנבואה כשכעס עד שהסיר כעסו, והוא אמרו ואתה קחו לי מנגן. מנגן? Is that, I'm reading that right?
מנגן, yeah.
ובעבור ההנחה והדאגה של יעקב אבינו עליו השלום, כל ימי יתאבלו על יוסף, נסתלקה ממנו רוח הקודש. עד שנתבשר בחייו, אמר ותחי רוח יעקב אביהם. ואמר המתרגם, ושרת רוח נבואה על יעקב אבוהון. ובלשון החכמים, אין הנבואה סורה לא מתוך עצלות ולא מתוך עצבות, אלא מתוך שמחה.
Right. So what Rambam is telling us is, and we'll dive in a little, but he's sort of talking about how, certain negative emotions ultimately, specifically anger and like this, this sadness, this atzvut, they basically immediately block prophecy. And classic Rambam wanting sort of the golden mean, the balance, right? You need to have an emotional balance of joy and composure to actually be able to prophesy. Now, anger, kas, who Rambam, not here, but in Hilchot De'ot, talks about how it's an extremely bad trait. We spoke about this, if you guys remember, in the earlier chapters, about how Rambam is actually, it's very important for him to have that balance, but when it comes to anger, he says you got to avoid it entirely. Basically, right? He doesn't want that balance. He says, like, there isn't a place for an anger like that. It should be avoided completely.
I would say that it's probably better translated in this context is wrath rather than anger.
Sure. Yes. Okay. Correct. Well,
why are you making that distinction, Gina?
Yeah. Please expand.
So I'm just saying, like, the connotation, I think that when we translate to English, right, I don't think this is regarding, the sort of anger that comes forth in rebuke, for instance, like you should have known better, but you didn't do this. Rather, it's the sort of kanaut style of anger that is referred to in Elijah. So I think that's more of like if we take the word wrath, it has something like the connotation of the cardinal sin in Christianity, right? It's a more significant version of that. At least that's how I thought it would be read, but
I would slightly agree where rebuke from an educational point of view. So you are correct that the Rambam does clarify that when it comes to chinuch, you can act as if you're angry, right? Which is then there's a sense of a seriousness, or you could be disappointed, like your kid tries to cross in front of a red light. There's a sense where you want them to know that like this is something that was problematic. So you might have like an angry demeanor on you, but he then stresses, but it's only an act. As in allowing yourself, there's like an ego point of view. So allowing yourself to be consumed by an anger, that is the severing, because then there's this thinking about like me, I'm disappointed, I'm angry, and the ani, the me, is then there's going to be very difficult for you to then think of connecting yourself back to the divine. So I would say wrath vadai, but even sort of I'm stubbing my toe anger, that in itself is sort of like to get, it's not that you can't feel pain, but to, let's say, start cursing and getting upset about that is a loss of control, right? I wouldn't say that's like a wrath necessarily. That's just like an anger, or sitting, as we all know in Israel, sitting in traffic, right? Very quickly brings out a part of us that like suddenly you could be getting in the car being all about peace, and then within 2 seconds you're hoping every other car on the street blew up, basically. So that kind of, or maybe that's just me, but that kind of anger is problematic. And the Rambam gives us like well, first of all, the Talmud also talks about how if prophets become angry, then their spirits depart, their prophecy departs. But he gives an example over here with Elisha, right? When Elisha wants to prophesize, but he was angry, he needs to calm himself, and he asks them to bring also from Bnei Nevi'im. These were sort of like the school where the prophets would study. Bring me someone to play some music, because that is going to calm me down and put me back in a joyful state, and only then I could come back into prophecy. And we obviously see these in other traditions as well. We could,
yeah, but another point maybe I want to point, like, again, this is translation is always imperfect, but I'm just saying, like, he is talking about virtues, where a virtue is not just a mental state, right? To be a wrathful person is something about a lack of virtue, right? You don't have composure as a virtue. But like virtues, when he's talking about the midot, right, all of them need to be like this golden mean, right? So I'm just...
But that's what Chezi was saying. The kas, from the Rambam's point of view, at least in Hilchot Deot, is not there. There is no golden mean for kas. There is a way that you can use kas
as an act.
As an act, we just spoke of, in Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal also talks about it, where it's a kas panim instead of, we just talked about it yesterday. So that's why I remember. Kas panim instead of kas lev. You need to show it. It's charon apo. It's like the wrath that you can show in your face, but it's not something that should be coming from within you. So you use it as a teaching tool, but it's not integrated into your being or anything like that, or it's not part of what you bring out. But it's not about doing it less or more. You're not supposed to engage with it. So I think it is it's separate from those, which is interesting.
Right. Yeah. He's very adamant about this.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the music connection, regel achat, we should just think about this as, why do really people create art? And, I would posit that it's not because they are lacking something, but they're overflowing with something. And in this sense, just like God doesn't create the world because of a need that he has, but this is sort of an act of self-expression, right? So when the human creates as well, this is why Chazal, right, our sages, connect nevuah to nigun, because just like the prophet and like the artist are trying to bridge between something that's finite and infinite, right? So the artist gives or let's say bezeir and pin. If I'm creating someone a house, right, I'm giving form to the ineffable in a certain sense, and the prophet is then speaking the ineffable out loud, right? So even that connection between music is a sense where like music is, for the prophet, is allowing him to get back into that flow state. But you could read much into music, and I'm not even thinking about Gilad, you as a musician who enjoys playing music as well, right? So there's a sense, and you could obviously disagree if music is something coming out. It's not that something was lacking, but more once you create that music, there's like sort of an expansion.
I would definitely say that it's not because something is lacking that you go into music. I remember there's a podcast, a talk that Vervaeke had with a blues artist, I think, or jazz artist. I think it was blues, but he gave this nice phrase where he said, having the blues is not the same thing as playing the blues. Right? Like when you come to the point where you've played the blues, like you've gone through a lot of process with, you know, the sort of emotions and the tragedy of the state that you're describing, and that's, I wouldn't say, again, like sure it came from a place of distress and disharmony, but the expression within music is actually the point where you've managed to find the beauty in it and to somehow bring that forth as something. And I think even like very intense music that can feel like it's anti-beautiful in a sense, that it's disharmonious in many cases, is still an expression of beauty.
I hear what you're saying. My stress, and in blues, and blues specifically, is one where you see, like, you know, and that the cultural idea of also, or the concept of you know, having the blues being down. So there, in theory, like there is a sense where I'm expressing because I'm like lacking something, but. And you are correct that the final production might be like, once I process through all that, now I could create this thing. I would argue that a 6-year-old Mozart that needs to just create music is not someone that feels like, you know, like something's missing for me, and like I want, and because of that I'm doing something. Rather, it's I want to expand more.
I wanted to just ask one more question. I know like we're stalling on this quite a bit, but when you say, according to the Rambam, about anger,
mm-hmm.
you gave, at least by implication, the sense that the reason that prophecy escapes from you is because anger is egoistic to the extreme, right? Like you cannot be like connected to the divine because you're sort of too obsessed with yourself and your sense of self-righteousness, maybe, or something like that.
You also think you were wronged, right? Like there's the way you're also looking at the world is sort of like bishvili notzar ha'olam, in this sort of attitude, which is like, now I was wronged, and like putting yourself very much in the center,
mm-hmm.
which is never your place.
Yeah, I was just making sure that I understood that.
Yes. Ben, I realized we didn't read this in English, though.
I can read through it quickly, and then we can.
I'm saying for people that are listening, I just think it's important. But 1 second, Ron, any thoughts, complaints?
Only that about the anger. I think there is a big difference. I don't know what kind of anger the Rambam is referring to, but if I had to guess, I think he's referring to the wrath is an expression of a permanent anger, a chronic anger that comes from the inside through bitterness, continuous bitterness, like Cain, and that's what resonated when Gilad read those lines. I thought about people who express their anger as pulses, just to have a glimpse of what is happening really inside of them, which is chronic bitterness that create a lot of anger to the world. And you cannot be connected to the divine if you are in this state. And it's not the kind of anger that when you stump your toe, you're a generally happy guy. It's okay to be angry for stumping your toe for a minute, but it's not bitterness. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would focus. I would stress. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I would stress that when Maimonides gives the example of Elisha, right? Right. So we're not talking about someone over here it's super permanent. We're talking about he's like, well, I need a second to go breathe. And it's more than I just need a second to go breathe. The king is asking him, I need you to prophesy, right? Like, I need you to be the Jedi right now. And he says, like, okay, if you need me to like also perform, not only calm down, perform, I need a second, I need to breathe. And more than that, I need you to come someone to play music to put me back in the zone. So I would say it's not someone that is actually necessarily dealing with something that's chronic, but someone that was his meditative state. Or one would be ideally like, with your with the apps today, with the Sam Harris
meditation.
What's the word I'm looking for? The
Waking Up, I think it's called.
No, that's the name of the app, but the concept of
mindfulness,
exactly, being mindful, right? So the mindful person in theory is not getting angry, right? Because he's in the state of being mindful of what's going around him. This happened to me, the way I should react, I should be mindful of how I'm going to react. So that person is in that sort of Zen meditative state. And if he loses that, I wouldn't say he's chronically upset, just he's now severed that connection.
I would add one thing is, I think we all agree that there's a qualitative difference between a wrathful person and an angry person, right? Like Ron, I totally agree with you. I still think that from the Rambam perspective, he says that probably even stubbing your toe and then being angry is something that you don't want to have. But I think the important thing maybe as I understand it, the important perspective to understand here is the Rambam is talking about prophecy here. He's not talking about somebody that stubs his toe, then he gets angry, and it might be fine for most people most of the time to get a little angry when they stub their toe. Maybe they don't want to do it eventually, but it might be fine day to day. But if you're a prophet, if you're somebody at the highest level, if you miss even that small moment, if you lose yourself, even for that small, tiny moment, it could be significant. Just like you can think about it as like an athlete. I remember I wasn't necessarily an athlete, but when I used to play tennis, and I would get really angry, like at competitions, and I would like throw my racket. And I wasn't an angry person, but there was something there. But like I would get angry over small things, and even that like small moment of anger can shift your game. Like, okay, now I'm like not attuned to it. Like I'm not considering what my opponent wants to do, right? So on that level, it matters even more so than maybe for most people. So I think maybe that's the Rambam's perspective as well.
Before we continue with this concept of atzvut, maybe or sadness, maybe just read it in English.
Yeah. Thou must not be surprised to learn, however, that a few moral imperfection lessen the degree of prophetic inspiration. In fact, we find that some moral vices cause prophecy to be entirely withdrawn. Thus, for instance, wrath may do this, as our rabbis say. If a prophet becomes enraged, the spirit of prophecy departs from him. They adduce proof from this from the case of Elisha, for whom, when he became enraged, prophecy departed, until his wrath is subsided, at which he exclaimed, "And now bring me a musician." Grief and anxiety may also cause a cessation of prophecy, as in the case of the patriarch Jacob, who, during the days when he mourned for Joseph, was deprived of the Holy Spirit until he received the news that his son lived. Whereupon Scripture says the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived, which the Targum, which I guess it means Unkulus, renders, and the spirit of prophecy descended upon their father Jacob. The sages, moreover, say the spirit of prophecy rests not upon the idle, nor upon the sad, but upon the joyous.
We'll note over here that they use the term wrath, as you mentioned, Gilad, but they also say enraged, and they also say that, like, again, like they speak about the Elisha moment where, like, he's enraged, but it could pass. I don't even know if wrath over here, the way it's translated here, is necessarily the wrath that Ron was talking about, which is like sort of like, I'm like this person that's like constantly have like.
I think that maybe resentment would fit something like Ron was describing, right?
Yeah.
I'm asking you, Ron.
Yeah, just the outward appearance of chronic resentment is usually anger, unjustified anger at an innocent party.
I mean, I would argue, we could potentially argue that don't allow, let's say, I wonder, let's say I'm in a resentful state, but I haven't yet became, I don't know, I was going to say, like, I'm not angry yet. Like, can I have prophecy while being resentful? I would potentially argue that, like, Elijah is sort of playing with that line, right? He's very upset at Israel, but is he consumed by that anger? I want to think about that.
I mean, I wanted to ask about Elijah before, so you brought him up. So that's a good opportunity. So I think Elijah was certainly portrayed as being very like fire and brimstone, right? Mm-hmm. And my sense is that perhaps that's like permissible for prophecy, in the sense that it was all of his kanaut, and it limited him, but in the sense, like, he is not resentful for what has been done to him. He's resentful for the way that God is being like abandoned or not followed properly, right?
Correct.
So like his sin is that that's sort of not his place. Right.
Yes,
it's kind of like Rashbi in that sense. Like when he comes out of the cave and burns everything he sees, and right. Says, like, this is not your place to be doing.
Right. So I mean, first of all, you are correct, and there's a sense, we're going to see this in a minute in the grief, which is like there's a difference if things are l'shem shamayim or not, right? Which is like an Elijah saying, I'm not just like this angry man, but like I'm angry because of like the standard that I'm sort of trying to uphold for you, God. But the sages, like the Rambam, for example, says that Elijah lacked mercy, right? Lacked chesed, and ultimately God. And this here, we're leaving the Rambam for a second. We're diving into like the Kabbalistic text. But Hanoch, who also is someone that's taken quote unquote alive, and Elijah is also taken alive. These are people that God's like, okay, like you're not a bad dude, but you're just not getting it. Like this is not going to work. And like, it's not a punishment, but like, you just don't belong over here because you're not managing to sort of get on the same frequency of these people. And that's why Hanoch, who turns into, according to some, turns into Metatron, his real name is Yehoel, which is the same name, letters of Eliyahu. So like the Zohar is playing with this figure that is sort of is being taken away. And the reason Hanoch is taken away, and you can also see this in the name, is a fail to lechanech. Hanoch is not managing to speak to the people and elevate them. He has these lofty ideas in the mountain and he's connecting to God, but he doesn't know how to, the people are acting badly and he doesn't know how to be the mediator. And we see this fail also again with Noach. Also, you could look at the name Noach, not just as comfort, but also as chinuch, which he too, when God tells him the world is being destroyed, he doesn't go and tell everyone, I'm going to do the best I can to try to mediate. Are me and my wife going to be okay? I'm going to build an ark and I'm living in my own little world. So him too, God doesn't remove him from earth, but in a certain sense he does, right? He puts him in this little womb and like removes him from everyone else basically. So these are failed educators. And even in this sense, Eliyahu fails. He has a chance to redeem himself in theory, right? That's like he always comes back and he has to be there for every breach. And the idea is for him to see over the years that like these people that you were very angry about, nevertheless, they are my chosen people. And it's not them that need to change. It's you that need to soften. Okay. So the idea of atzvut, though, or grief, right? So, like I was saying, if there's sadness and grief is not really l'shem shamayim, right? So there is. The Torah gives us the 7 days of mourning, right? The Tkufat Shiva, which is here. It's really more of a pain and a sorrow. But ideally, after 7 days, which we realize you need to mourn. But even from there comes growth. Even the concept of Baruch Dayan Emet is already bringing you into this mindset of like, this is a sorrow and this is a loss, but I understand it as part of a bigger picture. But just sadness that you're disconnected from yourself and from the world means you're also disconnected from God, right? And he gives like this example of Jacob, right? For 22 years, his son is missing. And he thinks his son is missing. He thinks his son is dead, so he doesn't receive any prophecy. And then when he learns that he's alive, right, there's a tchiyah in him. That there's a sense that the prophecy returns to him. And it's not. Rambam also talks about this, how it's not ultimately going to come from. You can't get laziness if you're atzel, right, or if you're sad, but it's only if you're samech, if you're actual joyful. And
can't get prophecy, you mean? You said you can't.
And you can only get prophecy, yes. And rage or despair are really just, it's repelling you from the divine presence. And what he's ultimately telling us here, that there really has to be this emotional mastery over ourselves, right? That only the person that has like yeshuv hadat, or like I said, like composure, and has a trust in God and joys in the trust in God, he's this person that could divinate. And even like a brief lapse, like we said in rage, ultimately could disrupt this spiritual connection. There's a story in Rav Nachman. He talks about the 7 beggars. It's a very, very long parable that he talks about often. But one of the beggars, for all intents and purposes, is deaf. And at some point he tells the people, I'm not actually deaf. Rather, I'm just never listening to the world, because the world is always in the state of lacking, and they're only happy in contrast of lacking. Like I'm unhappy because I'm missing and I don't have and I need, and I'm only happy when I fill that gap. I'm independently happy. And that's the only thing I could hear. I can't hear like this fake happiness sort of which comes from like the lacking. There needs to be this true joyfulness that comes from a place of full trust in God, which, comes from a place of like, leitatar panui mine, right? I'm aware that you are made of all things and you are all things. So clearly I see this divine picture painted, and I managed to maintain my trust in God. And just the idea of like, if you do it Hashem b'simcha, which obviously the Baal Shem Tov emphasizes this much later, but we could see already, Rambam is already rooting this in the prophetic function, that you need simcha. So if you do it Hashem b'simcha is not just a encouragement, a little song that we should do. It's a spiritual requirement. Like only this kind of person is going to be able to do this. And you could say this is also why the Romans looked at the Jews at a certain point and thought like we serve Dionysus, right? Because we're constantly having wine and having parties and having things. And the sense is not because we just want to party with life. Rather, we want to be in this joyous state and to be able to be in this space that could actually prophesize. All right, Shelot.
And it just kind of brought to mind something that might be a bit of an offshoot,
Please.
but it's relevant. The discussion about grief really sort of brought to mind this image of Eli Sharabi, the hostage who was released. You probably saw the interview with him after his release, and to see him sort of with all that he's been through, expressing the level of gratitude and the ability to orient himself to the beautiful and joyful in life is something that I found very inspiring, and I think sort of speaks in the same language as this text.
I would say, first of all, thank you also for showing that. That's very obviously relevant for us today. I'm forgetting the name of this hostage, but she had like, the sticker when she came out says Be'emunah nichnasti ve'emunah yatzati, something like that, basically. And putting aside, let's say, my religious beliefs, right, which is, I would be like, that's great that you believe and you're coming out and you have faith. There's obviously like a psychological, strength to that as well, right, which is like managing to come into a place like that and managing to maintain your composure in a certain sense. I would say it might not. Person might think that they're not looking to achieve prophecy, but I would argue that kind of spirit of a person could lead and could be an indication to someone that has a very strong will and could potentially see things very clearly, because of what they could separate the wheat from the chaff, and their priorities change at that point. And ideally, that kind of person could then really look at the world and realize what actually matters and what doesn't matter. So there's a sense of like a heightened discernment if you could achieve that mindset in captivity. And we hope and we pray, and if possible, we send any energy that's out there that all our brothers and sisters that are still in captivity will remain strong and with their spirit. And we wish them, the ones that have already come out, a speedy recovery, a physical recovery, and a mental recovery, obviously. And none of us are fully complete until all our brothers and sisters are back home. Let's continue. Then you want to read it? I'll read it in Hebrew. You want to scroll down? Okay, we're getting to the big man. וכאשר ידע משה רבנו עליו השלום, שלא נשארה לו מחיצה שלא הסיר אותה, וכי נשלמו בו מעלות המידות כולן והמעלות השכליות כולן, ביקש להשיג מהות השם יתברך על אמיתת מציאותו, אך שלא נשאר לו מנוע, ואמר הריני נא כבודך, הנה לא נשארה לו בינו ובין השגת הקדוש ברוך הוא על אמיתת מציאותו, אלא מחיצה אחת בהירה, והוא השכל האנושי שאינו נבדל. וגמל עליו יתברך חסד בתת לו מן ההשגה אחד ששאלה יותר ממה שהיא אצלו קודם שאלתו, והודיעו שתכלית היא אי אפשר לו, פני שהוא בעל גשם. גשם, not rain, mean גשמיות. וקינה אמיתית ההשגה בראיית פנים, that's what he called it, כי האדם כשיראה פני חברו, תהיה אז בנפשו חקוקה צורתו, עד שלא יתערב לו עם זולתו, אפילו בשעה שאינו רואה אותו, right? He knows his outline. אבל כשיראה אחוריו, אף על פי שהוא מכירו בראייה, היא פעמים מסופק עליו להתערב לו עם זולתו. כן השגתו יתברך על האמת. היא ידיעת השם יתברך מאמיתת מציאותו, מה שלא ישתתף במציאות ההיא, זולת מן הנמצאות. עד שימצא בנפשו מציאותו חזקה ונבדלת על מה שמצא בנפשו, במציאות ששאר הנמצאות. ואי אפשר לאדם להשיג זה, השיעור מן ההשגה, אלא שהוא, עליו השלום, השיג למטה מזה מעט. והוא אשר קינה ואמר, וראית את אחוריי, ואני עתיד להשלים, זה עניין בספר הנבואה. Let's stop there.
Now we want to read in English before discussing it, right?
Yeah, let's read in English before we discuss it.
I'll go first.
Please.
When Moses, our teacher, discovered that there remained no partition between himself and God, which he had not removed, and when he had attained perfection by acquiring every possible moral and mental virtue, he sought to comprehend God in his true reality, since there seemed no longer to be any hindrance thereto. He therefore implored of God, "Show me, I beseech thee, thy glory." But God informed him that this was impossible, as his intellect, since he was a human being, was still influenced by matter. So God's answer was, "For no man can see me and live." Thus there remained between Moses and his comprehension of the true essence of God only one transparent obstruction, which was his human intellect, still resident in matter. God, however, was gracious in imparting to him, after his request, more knowledge of the divine than he had previously possessed, informing him that the goal that he sought was impossible of attainment, because he was yet a human being. The true comprehension of God, Moses designates by the term beholding the divine face. For when one sees another person face to face, his features become imprinted upon the mind, so that one will not confuse him whom he is seen with others. Whereas if he sees only his back, he may possibly recognize him again, but will more probably be in doubt and confuse him with others. Likewise, the true comprehension of God is a conception of the reality of his existence fixed in the mind of the knower, which, as concerns this existence, is a conception not shared by any other being. So that there is firmly implanted in the mind of the knower a knowledge of God's existence, absolutely distinct from the knowledge the mind has of any other being that exists. Is that it? Or do we continue?
What's the next line after that?
It is impossible, however, for mortal man.
Continue.
It is impossible, however, for mortal man to attain his high degree of comprehension. Though Moses, peace be unto him, almost but not quite reached it, which thought is expressed by the words, "Thou shalt see my back parts." I intend more fully to discuss the subject in my book of
prophecy. Again, pushing his books.
Yeah.
That was the only way. There was no Joe Rogan then to sell your stuff at the time, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously, I'll preface this by saying this is like, there's you could just spend years just on this, on what's going on over here. But Rambam is sort of telling us that, right, Moses reached this total perfection, right? Morally is the midot, and intellectually are the sichliyot, right? He gets to this Super Saiyan next level. And there's no more partitions, right? There's no more mechitzot anymore. This famous line, Harei na kvodecha, right? Show me your glory. And he really wants to perceive God's essence, right? The amitit mitziuto. Now, we could off the bat ask, like, why is he even asking this, right? Like, philosophically, we all know that you can't know one's essence if you're external to it, right? So what, like, the philosophers know this, and why is Moses, like, even asking this question? Off the bat, we could just challenge it. Like, if he's the heaviest hitter we had, how is he asking this question? So we also have to be fair with these questions and realize that in the time of Abraham, right, like, believing God could do miracles is the shock, right? Like, when he hears about his son that he's going to have, he's not like, well, of course, because God can make miracles. That is what requires faith at that point, right? So usually we could say these questions we shouldn't take these questions seriously, or they're juvenile, unless they're asked for the first time. If they're asked for the first time, if you put yourself in that context, there's a very deep question about that. In today's day and world, saying, can God do miracles, is sort of like, you would be wrong because you're doubtful of that. But when Moses is asking that, it's not heresy. He actually wants to understand, right? This is someone that's coming to this from the first time and trying to understand sort of this essence. Now, I would say the Rambam's explanation is really that the only remaining barrier was an ontological one, right? Moses' human intellect is still tied to his physical body, right? The sechel enoshi she'eino nivdal, and that's why at no point can he eventually pass that last veil, because he's only using the capacity of a human at the end of the day. And even through all the prophecy, that's the pinnacle of the human, but it itself is still limited, right? So this partition, right, it says is behira, right? It's clear, it's transparent, but it's still limited, right? So the aspaklaria meira that he's looking through, this clear glass, nevertheless, there's still glass, and there's sign that he's missing from that. Now, we can say that this is like right, a soul in a body, like we're saying, can't really attain like this pure abstract knowledge, and which we could say is sort of like disembodied intellect, like the angels. There's a whole separate discussion that Rambam has about the angels and what level they're sort of reaching, but like that would be like a disembodied intellect. And what the Rambam is stressing over here, that God does grant Moses like the maximum understanding that human really can. And then this whole conversation about his back and not his face, right? So the Rambam would say that the face is the direct, unmistakable knowledge of God's essence, which you say we can't attain, and the back is the indirect knowledge, which is clear, but it's not complete. Maybe that's the wrong word, but that's the word I'm going to use right now. It's not complete. Now, I would say seeing the face is not the philosopher's but it's the sort of the who you are, right? So in Rome back in the day when sculptors would sketch their beautiful sculptures, they would never do the eyes, because while they could do a beautiful thing of how the body looks, we don't actually know what's going on inside. And Moses is not like he's talking to Anochi Hashem. I want to know the person that is there. And I would say in the guide, which Rambam writes later on, right? He says that we can know that God exists and some actions and his attributes ultimately, but now how God exists in himself, right? We can only see how these certain attributes end up creating like this outer picture of what he is, but we never could understand fully the essence.
How would you make that picture? Like if I'm looking at a person, if I have a really good friend, what is the difference between me knowing the essence of my friend, and just recognizing by my friend by his
back, right? So I see the outline. Right. There's many things I can know from that, from certain things of how we'll say not the attributes, but I could see my friend's back and I could see how he's running, how he's moving, and there's many things I could extrapolate from that. Nevertheless, because I'm not seeing his face right now, I'm still lacking what's going on inside. I don't fully understand what that is. So I could see an arm coming out and being merciful to, like I'm saying again, I'm seeing someone's behind and they're doing a good deed, right? So I can learn from that and I can understand from that. I can see a pattern of that, but I don't fully, and of course I have the Torah, presumably to guide me because that's God's words, right? So Moses is when Moses says Hareini Nakvodecha, that's sort of happening alongside a whole operating system that he's given as well, right? So it's not in a vacuum. There's a right of God that he has a relationship ultimately with, right? So I would say you could extrapolate certain elements, right? But Tarash Lila, there's things that we know he's not. There's things Rachum v'Chanun Erech Apayim. There's the 13 attributes that he gives us, so we could work off of that. But that's really it, ultimately. And I would even say that is when Moses comes back, right? And he comes back from receiving the tablets. V'lo yadaki karan or panav, right? He doesn't know that he has like this essence. Now, there's a reading which is Moses reaches this level of knowing that he can't know more. And that is a very high level, right? Realizing he's reached the limits of his intellectual capacity, and he's aware of that as well. This doesn't mean I need to push more. It means this is a limit, but by knowing this limit, I could also understand more about myself. And when he comes and wears the veil in front of the people of Israel, because his face is sort of radiant, in a sense, he's now allowing them to experience that as well, which is what I sort of felt with him, God, is now by veiling myself, you are now getting a certain idea of what that is, which is you recognize me, but you can't fully see me.
To your question, Ben, if I could add a bit, like I think you were asking something like, by analogy, how would that be with a friend, right? Mm-hmm. Not just with the analogy of seeing a person's back. Your question sort of reminded me of Martin Buber's philosophy, where he says, like, in most of our interactions, like we have this, like I'm talking to you, but there's me and there's you and there's what I think you see me as, and there's what you think I see you as, and there's what I think you think I see, and there's like this. A lot of media, there's a lot of like these partitions between seeing you and you seeing me. Like there's no real contact in most of our interactions. And
this is an I thou, correct?
Yeah. So this is an I it, right, at this point. But when those obstructions are removed, where those partitions are removed in an interpersonal relationship, then you have a relation where there is like a metaphorical contact. Like I'm communicating with you, and not like these images sort of communicating with each other.
Right.
And I think,
yeah.
I mean, in this analogy, I think what the Rambam would say is like, that's not something you can have with God. You can't have like that unmediated, direct contact like you can have with another person. Like, correct me if I'm wrong.
You are correct. However, seeing the person for who he is, or seeing God's image in the other person, like we say Moses didn't see God's face, but then later on we say that that Moses saw God's face like he sees his brother. And then also when Jacob comes to see Esau after he prays before the fight, he says, Kiraiti Pnei El, right? I see the face of God there. So there's a sense once, again, like this is sort of like an ego thing. Once you realize, Kulanu Rikmai Noshi Tachat, right? We're all this one sort of thing. In that sense, you are seeing more of God now, right? It's more than just seeing the Gilad in front of me or the Ron in front of me, the Ben in front of me. I actually see the divine spirit behind you. And by that, I also sort of see myself.
So it's kind of like, kind of like if you're squinting at something. You can look straight ahead at something and you have a certain focus, you have a certain view of it, but sometimes when you want to maybe see it even more clearly, for some reason you need to squint at it, or you need to if there is, you need to change your view a little bit. You need to throw a little bit of noise, and then it kind of focuses you. So I don't know where this is going, but I was just also curious about like the fact that you said that Moses put the veil so that they can see what he experienced, and it's kind of like, why does he need to do it? He has a face, he has eyes, and he has a mouth. They can just look at it, and it'll be perfectly fine.
Yes, so, but he is bringing down to them, in a certain sense, the experience that he had.
Right.
They're also hungry to know more, right? So we strive for imitatio Dei, right? For like imitating God. Mahurachum afatarachum. But we accept that God's essence, right? God's atzmut still remains beyond our human reach. And that's why Moshe is trying to let them know off the bat that like you need to reach the level of knowing that you can't know more, right? Even seeing me, you have to realize like this is what it feels like of being very close, but there's still being a veil there. I would say. Sorry, please.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is that you can look at a person, and if you look clearly at that person, like, our avatars right here, we look like there's nothing beyond us because we have a physical appearance. It's pretty straightforward. But maybe if we throw some kind of noise in front of us, or we create a little bit of that veil, it actually allows the other person to see beyond just the physical appearance. I think there's something there that I'm trying to express. I feel there is something to articulate there, but it's almost like if you throw a silhouette on a person moving, if you just saw that person moving with all the details and their muscles or whatever, and their clothing, then it would look like a person. It would look like a human being moving with certain clothes. But if you throw a silhouette on that person, suddenly you might have the thought that, that person, it looks exactly like an animal moving, or it looks exactly like this geometrical pattern that I noticed. And that allows you to see beyond that person just because you threw something in front of it.
I got you. So you're saying the fact that the fact that there's a veil forces me to sort of expand. I mean, I haven't thought about this, but this definitely has to do with prophecy as far as the koach hamedameh, right? It demands from the imaginal, demands from the prophet to sort of be able to intuit and imagine. And if everything's being shown to me, that's almost not necessary, right? There's a demand for me to sort of try to work around that. I would say in Kabbalistic terms, right, like the tzimtzum or the Ein Sof, right, which is God's inner reality is not knowable. We only see the or Ein Sof. We don't see the Ein Sof. We can only see something that's like sort of coming out from that. You're only seeing the silhouette, but that allows us then to like you're saying, what you're saying is a little more risky, but still relevant to prophets, because even prophets we see there's difference between Hoshea's third temple and Ezekiel's third temple. And that's because they're all they are seeing things their way. It doesn't make one true or not true. It's just these are different options and these are different things that they're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, but even prophets, I mean, like they're to an extent. I mean, even prophets go into a state that is about throwing noise into their reality, perceiving reality. They go into a state, they don't act like normal people, right? I mean, that's what the Rambam describes, I think, somewhere, right? It's very, in a sense, there is a almost like shamanistic aspect to it, where they're going through a state that is supposed to break something, to allow them to see something.
Maybe I can give an analogy from physics. So in physics, like people often talk about the things we don't know, like, maybe quantum gravity and stuff like that. But in reality, the effect that any additional thing that, at the very fundamental thing that we don't know would make very little difference. We know, like, to bound it, like it wouldn't change like a phenomena in an actual piece of metal, right? Those wouldn't change. So if you look at a piece of metal, you'd say, like, okay, I have the theory of everything. I know all of the terms in the equations that describe this thing. Only problem is it's 10 to the 23 couple differential equations that, with a fantasy computing power would take more than the age of the universe to solve all of these equations. And the interesting thing is that you could say, well, that's it, right? That's the end of exploration. We can't know this. But knowing that this is not something you will ever solve can bring about new insights. So that's, for instance, how superconductivity was discovered, because you basically take 10 to the 23 equations and you ignore them completely. You just don't look at them. And you say, what if we could ignore all of this and look at something called like a Fermi sea, something near like the energy levels of the electrons. And then maybe, like, if we change the way we look at this is like putting that veil on. We look at this like there's pairs that are created, there are electrons and holes. This is BCS theory. And then that was the theoretical development that explained superconductivity. So in a sense, like, you get a lot more intuition physically from not solving it, from not looking at the problem in the way that you're used to looking at it, in this, like, how you would look at a person by looking at their face,
right?
Than you would
by looking at their back.
Yeah. So by looking at their back, or looking, like you said, at this silhouette, this is like some other pattern, this reminds me of something, you actually get a lot more intuition than you would if you actually were able to solve all of those questions. You would get less intuition. You would have less understanding of, like, the actual way that superconductors behave if you could solve all of those equations, because why would that solution make sense to you, right? That is beyond what you can grasp, even if it were solvable.
That's a very, very deep insight. It's very much sort of, I would call, once you realize you can't know, and then you have to sort of, like, there's this intuitive portion comes in, you could also call that hope. Unlike Spinoza's sort of closed world, where, like, there's an answer for everything. Here, there's a sense where there isn't an answer for everything, not because there isn't an answer. Just I'm hopeful for understanding more, gaining more, intuiting more. So I think that was a beautiful, beautiful example. Thank you for sharing that. That was very good. Ron, thoughts, complaints, demands?
As a chemist, I would say that Gilad's knowledge of physics is disgraceful. Just kidding. That's a very good analogy. No, I'm actually quite enjoying listening, and figuring out that when the Hebrew part of Rambam is being read, I hardly understand anything, but when the English part is being read, is much simpler, which is also kind of a change of a reference frame or veil, or I don't know how you're going to call it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you.
We have to remember, Ben, even the Hebrew, it's a translation, right? Because it's originally in Arabic. And even that is, Rambam is translating Aristotle through Arab eyes, I'm saying. So you have like multiple levels over here. And we, in this little space, because anytime I'm mentioning over here Kabbalah, you could definitely see Rambam is rolling in his grave, right? But I'm on a mission to create like a synthesis, right? I believe that these things overlap, but like there's a sense where one should learn the Torah and be aware of the guidelines of Chazal and the sages and the rabbis and the things they instructed. However, it's clear that the Talmud, the Gemara, which is a pirush of the Mishnah, is not just like a pirush. It's a parshanut yotzeret, right? There's a sense over here where I'm just not translating. I'm creating this whole thing over here. And I think in today's day and age, definitely, whether someone is engaging for the first time or someone is continually engaging in the Torah, yes, like I said, have your toolkit of what the rabbis have said in the tradition, but you should be looking at it in fresh eyes. So reading the English translation over here, and you even saying that like, I don't understand it in the Hebrew, but I'm seeing it in English, that to me is the exciting part of it. It's like you're getting to experience Rambam in 2025, and I think in that way you allow those ideas to stay relevant. Definitely like the example that Gilad just gave, right? Which is like, that couldn't have been done then at that time. And now he brings in this beautiful concept. Wow, Ashrena, fantastic. Okay, last portion, chapter 7. וכאשר ידעו החכמים זיכרונם לברכה, ששני המינים האלו מן הפחיתויות, רוצה לומר השכליות והמידות, הם אשר יבדילו בין השם יתברך ובין האדם. ובהן הוא יתרון מעלות הנביאים. אמרו על קצתם במה שראו מחוכמתם ומידותיהם. ראויים הם שתשרה שכינה עליהם כמו שרבנו, עליו השלום. ולא יעלה ממך עניין הדמיון, שהם דימו אותו בו, לא שישבועם אליו חלילה, וכן אמרו על אחרים כי יהושע בן נון, ועל הצד אשר זכרנו, וזה עניין אשר כונו לבאר בפרק, בזה הפרק.
Okay. Right, so you didn't read this from my screen though, right?
No, not from your screen. You weren't on that part.
Yeah. Can you repeat it from the screen? Please?
Sure.
So wait, follow me.
No, scroll down.
You also stopped, but you also stopped. We also stopped in the previous portion before the end, so we missed it.
No, he said זה עניין בספר הנבואה.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
וכאשר ידעו חכמים זיכרונם לברכה, ששני המינים האלו מן הפחיתויות, רוצה לומר השכליות והמידות, הם אשר יבדילו בין השם יתברך ובין האדם, ובהן הוא יתרון מעלות הנביאים. אמרו לקצתם במה שראו מחוכמתם במידותיהם. ראויים הם שתשרה שכינה עליהם כמו שרבנו, עליו השלום. ולא יעלה ממך עניין הדמיון שהם דימו אותם בו. לא שישבם עליו חלילה. וכן אמרו על אחרים כיהושע בן נון ועל הצד אשר זכרנו, וזה עניין אשר כונו לבאר בפרק הזה. I have it open on my screen as well, just because it's not always big enough for me over here.
Okay.
Let me just do it in English.
Please.
Once I find it.
Control F prophecy.
You
could do that. That is true.
No, scroll down, Gilad.
I can't.
Yeah, here. So since the sages, not Gilad, sorry.
I'm gonna take your name on me.
So since the sages.
So since the sages, peace be unto them, knew that these two classes of vices, that is the mental and the moral, separated man from God, and that according to them the rank of the prophets varied. The rabbis said of some of their own number, with wisdom and morality they were acquainted. It is fitting that the Spirit of God should rest upon them as it did upon Moses, our teacher. Do not, however, mistake the intention of the comparison. They did indeed compare them with Moses, for they were far, God forbid, from giving them equal rank. In the same way, they speak of others, characterizing them as being like Joshua. This is what was intended to explain. This is what we intended to explain in this chapter.
Right. So the context of this Talmud reference in Sukkah is it 80? I think it's 80 great students that Hillel Hazaken had, Hillel the elder, and 30 were worthy of prophecy like Moses, they say, and 30 were worthy of Reuyim for miracles like Yoshua, right? Shamash Begivon Dom, like a crazy miracle. And so, but we're not talking about literal, equality over here, but it's really more of indicating sort of the potential, right? They had the moral and the intellectual perfection needed for prophecy. Now, I would say the Rambam is really emphasizing here that the sages were like, they're so refined that the only barrier was external, right? Their generation was lacking the merit ultimately so God is withholding prophecy from them. It's not like this guy or this guy are not great dudes. It's the whole generation is not in a place where it's even relevant to sort of have this connection right now. And so this perfection ultimately means nothing without the rest of Klal Yisrael in this sense, and that's why they have an obstruction of the Shekhinah, so to speak. Now, when he says this phrase over here, al tzad asher zacharnu, at the end of it, how is it translated in English? Scroll down a little further. Well, how is it? Let's 1 second. Where is it in Hebrew over here? And he says over here, this is what we indeed to explain in this chapter. No.
They didn't.
They just completely omitted that.
Yeah. Yeshua ben Nun yeah, they don't say that. They say characterizing them as being like.
So it's reminding us that like all this, right? These comparisons are being made based on these ideal qualifications we talked about earlier being present, right? Like wisdom and virtue. Like he's just referencing. It's weird that they just omitted that, but he's referencing that again, saying like of course, there's these prerequisites, right? I'm not just saying that they were already in this place.
Yeah.
And ultimately, right, the closest to God is what we're talking, even if you're not prophets, right, is ultimately determined by your ethical and your intellectual perfection. And I would say that really prophecy in that sense is not arbitrary, right? It's really a result of the character building and the knowledge building. Plus, of course, there's also God's will as well. But I would say that nevertheless, there's still expanded insight, right? There's like a imitation of prophecy, right? You have that even, unfortunately, that prophecy has ceased, even though I'm hopeful that it is returning. You could still, during that period, we still hear about stories of the Ruach HaKodesh, right? Like the divine inspiration that people have, right? My grandfather's very into explaining Ruach HaKodesh, also very much less sort of like as Mozart being someone that's like, divinely inspired. Who says this? The Meiri, one of the, as far as like heavy hitters go, also talks about that every generation has those who deserve that the Shekhinah should rest upon them. But again, it has to do with like a matchmaking with the generation, right? So while Bibi might be thinking that he's prophesizing about what's to do is right, it seems like there's a mismatch on the streets with people seeing him as the proper leader. And prophecy is not really it's not only the divine gift, it really is a fruit of the human effort, right? It's how hard you work on yourself could allow you to expand your mind and your understanding of the world you're in. Ideally, we all hope to be in a space where we could, I'll use prophecy here as seeing things clearly, seeing them truthfully, honestly, and again, at the very least, we should all work on speaking as honest as we can and as truthfully as we can, so we could try and map out a world that's actually in front of us. And with that, we conclude the 7th chapter, and we'll be moving in next week to the 8th chapter.
The last chapter. Then we have to think how we want to continue. But Ron, you are, of course, please hit us.
We have a time for a question?
Of course.
I'm not very familiar with this literature, I'll admit. I have a question from a layman. Okay. As I understood, the concept of prophecy basically mean that the person who is the prophet is somehow able to say next week that's what's going to happen, next year that's what's going to happen. He can
Not
tell
exactly.
about things that's a prophet.
No,
Not exactly.
that is also the sort of the difference, I would say, between like prophecy and, let's say, the Greek idea of, let's say, sort of like the Greek tragedy, which is like you can't escape your faith in a certain sense, because like what we say is going to happen is going to happen. And you hear the stories of the Greeks trying to do that, but like their faith is always locking them down. Prophecy is saying, prophecy is looking at the world and at the patterns unfolding and saying, if you continue in this way, then this will happen. It's seeing the timelines. It might not happen.
So marry that, but there is, make sure, how do we marry that with, okay, it is a gift that is bestowed upon somebody, right? Somebody can't just be a prophet because they can see the world and its patterns clearly. That is one aspect. You can be very intuitive, right? But prophecy, there is how is it also a gift? Did you receive it, right? So you're connected to something.
I think first of all, like we should separate between like the fact that like there's how Rambam saw prophecy, which is
correct,
what we're discussing here, and now like many others may describe it differently. I think the Rambam was very much in the sense that this is like the epitome of the sechel, right? Like if you are intelligent to the highest degree and you are virtuous to the highest degree, then I think you describe it, Chezi, as like you see through the matrix, right? Like that's the sort of view that the Rambam had about prophecy. And I think, from everything that he says here, right, this is what comes out. Certainly you can't be absolute like God is, but if you are like, if you get to where Moses has gotten, right, so virtuous and so intelligent, then you have the ability to see far deeper into the world, so that you would know it. I know that another concept of prophecy that definitely relates to the prophets of the Bible is this idea that you're not supposed to predict the future, but rather like you're the compass that says like, hey, we're not headed in the direction we need to be heading. Like that's your role.
Yes, but okay, so there's prophet that is the Jose, right? So there's a prophet that is having a relationship with God and being enlightened by that and understanding the world better, and then sort of preaching Torah and God's wisdom to the people. And then there is the Navi that is being sent to tell the people, like the story of Yonah, to tell the people in Nineveh, if you don't repent, then the bad thing is going to happen. And many times they also have to bring miracles with them, sort of because they see this, they need to prove to the people that they need to sort of listen. But like I was saying earlier about the different prophecies we see with the different prophets is again, there are some prophets that talk about in the third temple, the Goyim, the Gentiles, are very involved and they're praying with us and they're together. And there's some that are saying, no, that anyone that's not circumcised can't come inside. No way, no how. Now, you could answer that both could be true. It sort of depends how the world wants to interact with us. There's a version where that timeline comes out like this. There's a version where the timeline comes out like this. There are promises that are made, right? So like all prophets could connect back to sort of like the cloud and say, there's the general prophets of Geulah, but Beitah Chishena, it could take another 200 years. It could happen tomorrow. It sort of depends how you're looking about it. So unlike just looking at the future and saying like you should vote on those lottery tickets and now you're going to win. That's not how they're looking at the world. They're more looking at how specifically the Jewish people, are interacting between themselves and the land, between themselves, the land, and God. And if that's done in proper orientation, then I could prophesize and say, then these good things are going to happen. And this is also why telling us today, like if you look at Brachot Shema, that if I don't do what God wants, there's not going to be rain. So we would all be like, okay, but that's gobbledygook. Obviously, we realize that's what are you talking about? Like if I don't pay my taxes, there's not going to be rain. If I'm not being nice to my neighbor, there's not going to be rain. But for the man in the Bible, at that time, hearing that from God or from the prophet, he's realizing and being told that all the world is connected. So you go back to that is the original sort of global warming sort of action. If you are completely egoistic, if you're only thinking about yourself, if you don't see yourself part of this bigger picture over here, then the rain will stop. Then you will destroy this earth. Ultimately, there is going to be a severing between if you act improperly, you and your community, your family, your nation, the whole people, then this whole game that we're playing over here, this simulation called life, is going to fail. Today, for us, again, connecting those dots seems like ridiculous to us in a certain sense, which is like, why would those things be connected? On the other hand, when you hear Greta Thunberg yelling about global warming, you realize that like our actions definitely are connected to these things. And the people that could see those things, I'm not saying that the Navi was warning about global warming, but he is warning how even your little action is connected to the whole cosmos. And that's why if you're oriented properly, I can see the matrix clearly, and I can draw a map for you how it's going to work out, and you'll be able to stop those bullets. But if you want to live in your, like, what does Cyrus say when he's talking to Agent Smith? I want to, I know I can't taste this steak or do this steak, but I miss like this memory. If you want to go back to sort of this like egoistic sense of yourself, of there's just me and my taste, then you're living in a much smaller world, and you're going to see things a lot less clearly.
Maybe I'll just add
Please.
One more thing that I think, at least for the Rambam, there's a continuum. Like when Joseph made like the prediction, like there's going to be 7 good years, and then there will be 7 bad years. You have to stock up on food because this drought will be very tough and it will last a long time. And he knew this 7 years in advance. Like that's something that, at least by the Rambam's vision, this is a part of being able to see through the matrix. And another part of it is what you're saying. And there's a line connecting. If you are intelligent and virtuous, then you can see both of those things. You can see like the pragmatic sense, like I can actually make some reasonable predictions about how the world's going to go. And you can make the orientation sense. So you can say like, we're not oriented correctly, and when you're not oriented correctly, things are going to go bad.
I agree, it's both. I would say specifically with that example, you could say, what's the big, when Moses hears Joseph, he says, "Hanishma kazeh davar b'chol haaretz." Like he's like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. Like, look at this. Now you think about it. What did he say? There's going to be famine years, and there's going to be good years. You should save in the good years so you could have them in the bad years. And you're like, everyone knows that. The miracle, his greatness is the Arei Miskanot, when he starts moving around, sort of like the invisible hand, so to speak. He is moving around complete cities. He's seeing much further than that. He understands that like all of Egypt sort of needs to change right now, economically, how the people are going to move. So it's seeing like what's going to happen, and then seeing like if you act properly, right? If I'm going to map out, it's like sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Secondary and third, like
effects,
basically. It's not just like I saw 7 bad years and 7 good years. By the way, there's even with Joseph, right? So he has these first dreams in the beginning, right? He has the stars and the sun and the moon, and everyone's bowing down to him. And then he has the wheat, the shibolot, and they're all bowing down to him. And he goes and tells his dad. And now his dad knows, his dad's Yaakov, right? So he's a serious Jedi. He knows what it is to have a conversation with God. His son, Joseph, and Yitzchak, his father did, and Abraham, his grandfather did. So the fact that Yosef comes and says like, oh, I had this dream, why is Yosef telling him, like, shutting him down? Why is Yaakov shutting him down? Yaakov's also telling him, you're like a young prophet. You don't know how to interpret your dreams properly right now. You're assuming we're all going to bow down to you. So he tells him, Aviv Shamalat Tadavar. He's saying, listen, you need to still sit on this. Later on, we realize there's different interpretation of it. There's like what the miracle actually was. What he was actually prophesizing was something else. But there's a sense that even the prophet, if he's going about it the wrong way, could misunderstand his prophecy itself. Right? Like there's a sense where, like, even if you're getting those voices, if you don't know what's going on, if you're not trained properly, or like Joseph, someone that's still meselsel b'se'aro, right? Someone that still has this sort of ego in him, he's still gonna miss the mark. He's thinking everyone's bowing down to me, right? So that's why his father's mad at him. He says, like, you're not acting like a prophet. You have these gifts, but you're not using them well.
It was also an interesting thing about this part that the dreams that he had made him kind of annoying to brothers, right? What advances the prophecy itself that send him eventually to France. No, just kidding, Egypt. And it's kind of funny.
We see, I mean, Rashi sort of commends the brothers, where at the very least they weren't, what they felt in their heart, they wore on their sleeve, or they weren't faking it. They're like, we hate this dude. And Joseph, you have to see, like, imagine like when his father, everyone knows that they hate Joseph. And then his dad goes to him and says, like, yo, Joseph, your brothers went out to do some work. Go see how they're doing. You can imagine there's like a pause in the house where everyone's like, why would you ask me to do that? And now he answers, he uses the word, Yosef uses the word hineni, which is usually the word saying of a shlichut. He's like, okay, this is like a bigger picture going on over here. Now he goes down to meet his brothers and he gets to the place where they're supposed to be and they're not there. You'd be like, he's like, thank God, I'm going to go back and I'm just gonna be like, they weren't there. He keeps on going, like he's looking for it. And now when he's coming, his brothers see him and immediately they're like very upset seeing him, right? They're very mad about this. Now, the whole book of Bereshit is really letting you know, like there's no reason of going on with the next books of Shemot and on if we can't create reconciliation. You have Cain v'Heva, well, you have already a lack of communication with Adam v'Chava messes them up. Cain and Abel messes them up. Then you have Yaakov and Esav, and you have Yitzchak and Ishmael, and constantly these brothers are constantly feuding. And it crescendos with Yosef, where the brothers really don't like him. What's very interesting is at the end, after he reveals himself, I love you guys, everything's okay, Yaakov dies, and the brothers get nervous again. And they say, like, now Joseph is going to kill us because maybe he was only being nice because dad was alive. But now that dad's dead, he's going to kill us. So Yosef goes to them and says, like, listen, guys, it's all good. God had this all planned out. What you guys wanted to do for evil ultimately worked out. So it's all going to be okay. And only then is there any point of continuing with the story of the Jewish people. The idea was that communication is possible and reconciliation is eventually possible within the family. And once the brothers showed that they could actually honestly do that, then we could move on with the continuation of the story of the people of Israel. But the whole story with Joseph was obviously extremely, extremely fascinating, and he was definitely annoying, and that's also because he was trying to rush something that was not ready yet. He is the archetype of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is trying to redeem the world through the secular. So he takes on the full Egyptian garb, and Egypt. Also, Chazal talk about how before the Jews were created, God's favorite nation was Egypt. They got to this crazy level of technology and their Khartoumim, right? Their own prophets were very in tune with what was going on. It was a very, very developed nation. And Joseph decides to use that, and I want to redeem the whole world through Egypt. Now, eventually he realizes that's not going to work, right? He says, you have to take my bones out of Egypt. Promise me you'll bury them in Israel ultimately. So and hence Gilad and I have spoken about often in the past how, let's say, Tzionut in a certain sense, right? Where how Rav Kook saw it as like Mashiach ben Yosef, again, being sort of like the secular version of Messianism, which it takes on the garbs of nationalism, democracy, a nation, because this is sort of what it's necessary. It needs to have this exoskeleton to allow it to move forward sort of in life.
If I could,
I'm gonna have to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody.
Catch you later.
Bye.
And Gilad, I just want to say welcome to Yoav. Wow, this is like the most amount of Jews in this channel in a long time. This is very, very impressive. And four of us live in Israel. Wow. Ben, please take care. Regards. Yes, Yoav, welcome. And Gilad wanted to share something.
yeah.
So, me first or Gilad first?
Yeah, let's let Gilad. He was in the middle of saying something. Then please.
Yeah. I will have to go soon. I just wanted to. I recalled from the discussion about grief a little gripe, really minor gripe that I had in one of the previous streams, where after I left you, I heard in the background you had said something, and then I couldn't get into the stream. You were talking about Tanuro Shel Achnai, and you said like the punchline of that story is Lo B'Shamayim Hi, and I just
Nitzchoni Banai, no?
Nitzchoni Banai, yeah.
Nitzchoni
Banai, and I just want to say that, like, at least my perception is that, like, no Talmud story has the punchline where you would expect it, and that's true for this one as well. And
there's a continuation to that.
And the continuation is important, and it deals with grief, right? That's so. I don't know. To me, I find that continuation part is what makes that story much more unique in the landscape. So I just wanted to bring it up because
I agree, but I would say the a line like Nitzchuni Banai being told, like the fact that Chazal is bringing in that idea of sort of that God himself is saying that I've been bested, right? That's like a very dramatic line. You don't see many of these lines.
I agree that it's very dramatic. I just found that the continuation, I don't know, made the story a lot more profound and worth sort of revisiting than if it had ended and then like some different story was told.
You know who agrees with you and mentions this also often is Jacob.
Okay.
He's like, no one understands the story. They never continue reading. Really, right? So.
No one. That's what he says.
Yeah. Yoav, I hope all is well. I hope you had a fantastic Pesach. Please share your thoughts, your ideas, enlighten us.
Okay, thank you. There is an English gentleman called Mr. Wolfram, one of the smartest, wisest men in our generation, in a science and mathematics way. And he invented a tool called Mathematica. It's a very, very famous tool among scientists and engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of an amplifier of the human capacity on those subjects. So as the inventor, and he also manages the company that makes this tool, he plays a lot with this Mathematica tool, and he gets leverage. He gets to be even wiser than before. And it's getting sort of superhuman insight into the world. And he noticed that one can assume that there is a mathematical, geometrical layer underneath the world.
What? No.
I'm here.
Okay, we lost you for a second.
This world is only an illusion, and the true reality below the world is a mathematical process called the cellular automata.
Okay.
And since an automatical process, if you know it, you can you have a perfect prophecy, because it step from one step to another. You can run the machine and see where the world is going. But this is not how we perceive the world. When we stare at the world, we see what we see, and we don't see this mathematical machine. So Mr. Wolfram wonders, what is with us that we cannot see reality as it is? And analyzing the problem, you see that we are suffering from two problems. First problem, that we are finite. Now, the word "we" is a bit inaccurate. He doesn't want to say we. He doesn't want to say us human. So he coins the term that I like very much, an observer like us. Any observer, maybe some extraterrestrial intelligence or artificial intelligence that shares our properties. And what are these properties? That we are finite. So we cannot execute infinite computation in our heads. The second property is that we are continuous, or we have the illusion that we are continuous. Because actually, atoms go and join our body, atoms leave our body, we are ever changing. We fall asleep and we lose consciousness, we get up and we regain our consciousness. We are a system in flux, but we have this illusion that we are one and constant. And this is the ego. This illusion is the ego. So our two human problems is that we are finite and that we have this ego. So if we didn't suffer from these problems, then we could have perfect prophecy. So why am I telling this long story? Because this is exactly what we have learned in this chapter about Moses, that he could be the wisest man ever, even without this tool called Mathematica, but he cannot achieve perfect prophecy because he's still a finite, and I'm not saying a finite human being, is a finite observer like us. And he's still a person with a ego.
I mean, this is all in reference, obviously, of Haredi Nakvadecha, right? When Moses is asking to see God's face. You're saying Wolfram's, yes. What's the name of his program that he built?
Mathematica,
right? I think didn't he have some conversation with Eric Weinstein on his because he also that right exactly that's his whole thing. I remember seeing him on Lex Friedman. Nachon.
He wants to look for cellular automata and the Ruliad. The Ruliad is the universe of all possible rules. He is asking the question, what rules does this universe follow? And he says that the only acceptable answer, philosopher, is all rules at once. So this universe is simply the combined agglomeration of all possible rules together.
I mean, if you're saying it's all possible rules together, again, this would sort of connect to why a prophet could see one possible version, right? There's multiple ways to see through it. If all of them are together.
Yeah, but some rules are even by themselves beyond the human capacity. There is one rule among the many, rule number 30, that is impossible for a human to understand or predict.
It's very fun, Ron, as you see, to have these conversations with physicists, chemists. Yoav's an engineer, right? So I hope you enjoyed this. How did Gilad sell this to you?
Me and Gilad, we've been having a lot of arguments in the university, and I left 2 years ago. I left for a period, and he missed me very much. And we met again like a month and a half ago, and continue having our conversations. And we never agree, but every time we both love not knowing and feel the whole of ignorance with something. So he knew that if you're going to send me a link, I will do anything to learn something new, especially something like this that I don't do very much anymore.
Did you do it in the past?
Yes. Approximately around 2020, I've discovered God has revealed himself to me. Let me know about his presence. And ever since, I've been reading the Bible like someone in the first grade reading the Bible, meaning that I'm like a child learning the Torah for the first time. And I've been going for some classes about the Tanya. And what I've discovered that I first have to do what every Jewish person does from first grade to the last grade, which is learning first the Torah in the simplest form, the stories, the heritage, and the rules and the morals, and later go to the underlying layer of the secret and everything that come after that. I got a lot of years ahead of me before I will see something like Rambam and understand the Hebrew. You know what I mean? I got a lot of time until I'm gonna do that.
First of all, I'm very excited for you, and thank you for sharing that. I would argue, though, Rambam was also very much about his seder, right? So like a chamesh lemikra and all these things that you have to do. However, I believe that in today's generation, I would even say the extreme example of this is, I bring this up often, are the protests that you see in universities in America. We're almost there as a population. The fact that these youth are so invigorated that they want to fight for like this, I would argue that they're off. Their orientation is off of like who they're seeing as the bad guy and the good guy over here. But the fact that you have Rav Kook would call this azut shebakdusha, right? The sense that you want to come and you're going to be brazen and you're going to say, we're not going to go to school. We're not going to do this. We demand that people be freed. We demand that the death stops. That is what, in a certain sense, God wants us to do. Lo tamod al dam re'echa. Don't expect that. So the generation wants higher values. And if 200 years ago, you could tell someone, listen, put on tefillin because God said so and you'll have a good life. So most people are like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Today, people want to know, our job now is like, you put on tefillin because there is famine and there's famine in the world. But how do those two relate? And you realize that the parshiyot in the tefillin are talking about the freedom of the person leaving Egypt and the idea of the individual being free, and how we have to realize that is what God wants from us and wants from all people. And we should do everything we can when we live in a world with such abundance, that if your focus is when you start your day and you remember that I am free and I need to make sure other people are going to be free and I need to make sure that everyone has that room. So tefillin is, in fact, there to orient you to think of the world in that way. And that, I believe, is what people are hungry to hear. They're not hungry to hear that do it because the rabbi said so, or there's a gematria that you need to do it. So I'll say, yes, you should learn Tanakh, and learning it like a first grader is amazing, because learning it that way, it's very hard for me to learn Tanakh. I know how the story ends, and I know that reference, and I know that game they're doing. It's amazing to read Tanakh where it's like a story where like, are they going to pick Ishmael or Yitzchak? Where's it going to go? Because when you read it that way, you realize like it could have gone a different way. But now, Ron, you're here today, and it's even crazier to think that from Adam until you, like it could have gone so many different ways. And yet here you are today in 2025 in the same land, talking about the same stuff in this revived language. Insanity. So like reading it that way, I would say is huge. I would say Torah, Nevi'im, and then I would say then go into Pardes. Go into the secretive. Go into Pardes is Rashi Tevot Pshat.
Pshat,
Right. So I would say
Torah, Nevi'im, then Pardes.
no. I mean that would be Pshat.
Oh yeah.
Right now, I would say, but then I would go into learning. I would say,
should I read also the until the all 5 books before the pshat of all 5 books, or I can start under the next layer while I'm still after like Nevi'im?
I need to say I would do a reading.
Right now.
I would do a reading of the 5 books first. And you could do it with Rashi, obviously, that he's also amazing. And then I would say Nevi'im. And once you read the Nevi'im, like Tanakh, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, you realize how they're being written and referencing the 5 books that you've read beforehand. But then I wouldn't focus on Gemara. Even the Gemara itself, people don't like talking about this. It's called Bavel, Talmud Bavli, because it's Mebulbal and Mevalbel. Okay, they talk about this about themselves. Now, it is an amazing piece of literature and it's holy and all the good stuff, but it's written in Aramaic, and those conversations were happening over 2,000 years. I'm a big believer of we are back in our land, and I demand a relationship with the master of the universe. And that's not going to happen through me struggling through Aramaic necessarily. It's like I said, it doesn't mean that doesn't exist and you could reference and learning it, but like thinking that like, if I don't know all the halacha and all the things, I'm not doing it. I would say first, return to the land of your soul. Like go back in, and that's learning Tanya, and that's learning Zohar, and that's learning those stuff. And if you're a chemist, yes, if this was 500 years ago, how could we expect someone like this to learn, the mystical things? But I would say that even based on this conversation, you have some of the tools intellectually to be able to grasp those things. Yes, you need to give yourself jargon, Jewish jargon to play with those things. But once that's happened and you feel that flame, then go into the halachot, the mitzvot, things like that, because I believe then taking them on has a whole different meaning to them. But the traditional word looks at in your yeshiva, you're studying 12 hours a day, Gemara, and that is the mindset of galut. And I am very much against that mindset. I don't know. I think you see that in. There's a great book by Rav Shirky. Shirky. And so I work with him where he works with his Bnei Noach. But I would recommend his book, Kedusha Shebateva. It's a fantastic book. And even I would just say, we did classes in this little corner on Pirkei Avot, and we did even this class on Shmoner Prakim La Rambam. I am very much a Talmud of his. I'm doing this through the prism of who does do a mixture of very influenced by the French philosophers. He's half Ashkenazi, half Sfaradi. So he's Algerian, I think. He's bringing in all the Ashkenazi world did not know how to balance between Kodesh Lechol. A comical example of this is when you see the Sephardi woman in Bet Knesset who's davening Tehillim but has like a shirt that says on it like in sparkles like sexy mama. She's not, you would never see like a Lithuanian Haredi like that, because it's so this is this and this and this. But the Kodesh Kedusha Shebateva ultimately is realizing how to take the mundane, which is called the Leviathan, but take the nature, take the chaos, and elevate that to another level. So I would even say, Ron, that you right now are, and this might be a lot, so you could ignore everything I'm saying. I know nothing. But there's the 3 versions of the Choser B'Teshuvah. There's the one that does the complete flip. I'm forgetting Mary Ariel, right? That like he was like a big, everyone loved him. He's Chiloni, and then he becomes full Haredi, and he leaves everything behind. Then there's the version of Eviatar Banai, right? I'm coming in, but like I'm taking some of this thing from the old world. And I would say the third version is the secular person, is the Ran that knows how to come in. I don't need to wear a hat and I don't need to wear the garb. I want to and this is something that us as Orthodox people, as Mishu Dati, it's almost I don't even remember what it is to imagine something like that, because after 2,000 years, I'm in this very structured system that is built. But now we require those from the outside, I would say our secular brothers and sisters, to come and if it's done lishma, to show us how we could take the chol and the kadeshet, which would be called kodesh kodashim. And as dati'im, we're very scared of that. We don't really know how to handle that well, because we only know within our gvulot, within our gizrot, and breaking that is very, very difficult. But that's a lot of pressure. So, yeah.
No, thank you for saying that, because I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about me being, it's not disappointed, is all my life. Now that I discovered my heritage, I have like thoughts about where this structure that been holding on for 2,000 years, why it never reached out for me, why I was there, and never, no one ever came to me, and I having questioned, and now you're telling me that it's a kind of maybe a kind of a handicap, maybe kind of a inability to approach a total secular mindset and change it, because I admit God had to come himself to turn me over. I never listened to no man. Everybody would come to tell me about God. I would dismiss them, and I had to see the light myself, and that's a problem. Now I'm facing it when I'm talking about people about God and the reality, and I see that I have no approach. There is no tool. There is no non-spiritual tool that I can approach somebody to show him what I see. And it's so frustrating. And why I ask you about sorry, Yoav, if I'm taking all the time. Forgive me.
You're not in this little corner yet, but like this is very much like this is all good and understood. This is a place where like where we're enjoying you just expressing yourself.
So that is why I asked you about the prophecy, the concept of prophecy earlier on, because ever since I started reading the Bible, I also made a vow to never lie, never always tell the truth, especially to myself. I've been keeping it for years, and why I'm asking about prophecy, because when I see these grand gestures of prophecy in the Bible, I see that this is like the optimal case of prophecy. But I'm saying, okay, there is like Jonah that come to Nineveh and all of the mission. But if you take this big scenario, make it smaller, it could be a friend going to a different friend and say, dude, if you're going to keep acting the way you do, it's going to lead to this and this and this. Meaning that I don't think we really lost the prophecy, lost the ability to prophesy. I think that it became a much smaller thing, because each and every one of us have a friend or a relative that we know from his own behavior that if he continue on that road, he's going to meet a certain kind of future, and it usually does happen. And when I look about what happened since 2020 until now, all the thing that came to light about the catastrophes we had in the world and what come to light after that, it's very easy to go to YouTube and see that there's a lot of prophecies before that. There's a lot of people on the internet, famous or not, that said, guys, we're taking a road that will lead us to this, and what you've been told is this, but it's actually this. There's a lot of things, like in hindsight, God, I think God sent us a lot of prophets, and we chose to ignore them. And you know what I mean?
One of the first things God asks Adam HaRishon in the garden is Ayeka, right? And he's hiding. And we're told that Ayeka is, ever since that first Ayeka, it's still reverberating, it's echoing constantly. Avraham Avinu is the first one to be like, I'm hearing an Ayeka, and he answers, Hineni, here I am, right? You would say even today, there's that sound is always out there. Tapping into that frequency is there. I would posit that since the return to the land and the return to the feminine, the return to the more intuitive, the fact that like we are on a land and we could start seeing ourselves not just as like this, not just as like this wandering nomad people, but now a people with an orientation and a direction and a land. The more we're here, the more that starts. And I think you could see this in the music as well. You can see the music starts. First of all, when Betzalel, the architecture school, opened up, Cook comes and says, this is the beginning sort of prophecy, which is like when a culture comes back, when we could start coming back to our land and start talking about a culture and designing stuff and building things, and we're starting to build more levels to who we are. We're returning back to Am Yisrael. And if you look at the music, you have the Lakot HaTzvayot, which is very secular. Then you have, let's say, your quintessential Israeli singer, which is Shlomo Artzi, which is very talented, but like a very Ashkenazi sort of sound. And I would say only in the last, since the 90s, but definitely in the last like 15 years, the fact that Yishai Ribo and Hanan Ben Ari and all these names are huge superstar names right now, which are like singing like literal psukim, Abba, I miss you, I want to come back, and you see crowds of people that are secular not singing. That is a return to something deeper, that we feel that we could finally start expressing this after removing certain layers. So the fact that you're saying that there's also a lot of voices out there that are trying to tap in and trying to see these things, I would argue that is what I believe are the data points and the bubbling of the, Yemot HaMashiach, the return of prophecy. It's scary because it also seems like the whole world is looking at us and we keep on fumbling very, very badly. And
you should come to the university.
Right. So
your faith will drop.
It's very מאוד קשה. Really, yeah. It's very hard, but I remain optimistic. I also think that Rav Shurki says this a lot, that like I'm very, Gilad and I we sometimes have separate streams where they're just like political streams, but that I'm happy in a certain sense of the insanity in the media, whether it's from Echonat Haral or the nonsense you hear on the other channels. It's because it's allowing for other processes to happen underground and not have the light on them, right? Like I rather the focus be like, I'm like, he lied, he's the worst, not Bibi, and I rather there be a Ron that's bubbling up. I rather there's other deeper connection happening underground, that people want to connect more and see more and demand more. And like I would think that after the 7th, it basically seems that like everyone in the government is lying all the time. Basically, everything's a lie, everything's a trick, no one's telling the truth. And maybe we need this to allow us to demand something much higher, something much cleaner. You're talking about like no lying, demand from our. And you could also see this in the 3-hour podcast. I want to see a leader that his mask doesn't drop after 10 minutes because then he's running out of talking points. I want to see a real person. And I think all that noise out there is allowing a quiet signal to go through. Hopefully we could nurture it properly.
Amen.
Please.
If Ran doesn't know, of course it's new. I don't know what he knows.
First time, knows nothing.
No.
I know nothing.
If you don't know anything, this, what we'll call this school, is a corner of what is called this little corner, TLC, this little corner. This little corner is a network, mainly non-Jewish, but certainly worth listening to. And Chezi spends a lot of time with them. Chezi can attest these are non-Jews you should listen to. And this little corner, the TLC, is also merely a corner in a bigger network that is the students of Jordan P. Peterson network. And Jordan B. Peterson is a great prophet, and he demands of you two actions. First, always try to tell the truth. And
Or
second,
don't lie.
or at least don't lie. Second, clean up your room. So you're already there. You're already accepted as a member of the Hasidut of Jordan B. Peterson, the TLC, and this school.
He's gonna now take down the 12 rules for life. As a good, tell me there you go. Okay. Number 2. I actually have a signed version of number 2 that I lost, which is not good. I need to find it.
But the most important one is this.
Maps to me. Oh, exactly.
That's the most important one.
That's why, Ron,
It's the one I got in in second grade. It's the one you got in the
We lost
second
Ron for a
grade.
second.
That's the one, and it's all torn. And the map, I did the school, the high school with it, everything, and I took it out of the garage and opened it like a couple of years ago. I started reading it, and it's the best thing ever.
I mean, Jordan Peterson obviously agrees. I call him like a modern day Yitro in a certain sense, someone out there that's like clearly recognizing what's going on. Now, it was nuts for me as a Jew to be sitting when he came to Israel, when he spoke. So it's a room full of Jews, many of them also religious, seeing this secular guy cry on stage about like how you're the people and everyone's looking at you and you guys on the mountain hill and you're like, everyone's getting up and clapping and you're looking like, what's going on right now? How, like, there's 1,000 rabbis out there that are trying to give a Dval Torah and people are falling asleep in Bet Knesset. And here people are paying $300 to listen to Jordan Peterson tell them about their Rashit, even though, which again, it's fun for a religious Jew to listen to him because you're like, what he just said right now, that's a Malbim. And that's a Ramban. And that's an Ibn Ezra. He's just saying it like way sexier than your teacher taught it to you, like in school. And he's using all these different terms. But that is like it's a beautiful revival. So again, like I don't look at him as like, oh, like Jordan Peterson is the Moshiach. But he is a lightning rod in a sense where he sort of a reminder to the whole world. And this is also what sort of spread this like little corner of the internet where we have like these kind of conversations. Specifically with our Christian friends, I always mention to them that they're going through, in a certain sense, like a modern day Gemara. You have all these different Christians, Catholics and evangelicals having these conversations about what God is and what does it mean. And it's a zchut sort of to see them have those conversations because they're it's lishma. They want to know. And it's a unique time where there's literally an ozen kashevet to Jews, and not only an ozen kashevet, but they're like sort of like hungry to like, what do you think? How do you see this? And it allows for this beautiful dialogue of two brothers looking for each other, like in the field, trying to have this discussion. And before October 7th, we also had some Muslims that we were having these discussions with because we also have to bring Ishmael back home. That became more difficult post October 7th, but here too, I remain optimistic that we will have peace with our Muslim brothers as well, inshallah.
Oh, okay, comment. I'm a very polite person, and when I'm talking with our friends in the TLC, Christians of many flavors, sometimes I disagree with them. But that TLC is not about having an argument or a quarrel. Also with Chezi, I mean, I like his optimism and his spirit and his energy. Not necessarily always agreeing with him. But as a student of Jordan B. Peterson, you're automatically accepted to do TLC, and you should explore it because you will hear other voices, and you need to hear a lot of voices counterbalance to Chezi.
I would say a great example of that, Yov, is the stream we're having right now. Like the platform we're on is run and sponsored by this guy named Jacob Federecci, and he's like anti-Zionist, calls me a heretic. He loves me, but like he is very much like anytime I talk about Rav Kook or like Zionism, he's like, that's like the work of the devil nonsense. And that's possible though, because there's a sense where like that's only at one level. There's like a deeper conversation happening over there regardless. So like what Yoav is saying is like you will definitely hear different voices than mine, but and Gilad also could assist you. There's like a whole Discord level, which is a little more rough as far as the conversations going on over there. A lot of jokes going on over there. And then there's like these little different corners. You right now are in the Jewish corner. This is called Jacob's Ladder.
So first of all, how do I get notified about a conversation, this specific Jewish conversations, Jacob Ladder, and how do I get notified about those things?
You join the Discord.
TLC. Huh?
You join the Jacob Ladder Discord.
I'm gonna attach a link right now to the Discord, and you could also subscribe to his channel because then there's like the notifications there. 1 second, how do I do this again? How do I invite someone onto this?
While Chezi is working on the, I want to speak about myself and the subject of Chazara B'Tshuva. I am not going to do Chazara B'Tshuva because, in my opinion, this is what my grandfather did when he came back to Israel. That was the only Chazara that was required, because now I'm an Israelite. What I do like a lot is to repent, because the action of repentance is to think again. I start every day thinking about the issue again from first principles. Never assuming that I know the answer, always knowing that I will not get the answer, but always thinking about it.
I would argue, though, that you also, in my rubric, you fit into the third version of the Chazer B'Tshuva, which is like you might find it that I'm still giving you that label, but I'm saying I agree that I first of all, again, who am I? But I don't look at Yoav as being like he's so far away, and like if he only knew, if he only put on the tzitziot, then he would be saved. Whether that happens or not is a separate conversation. I see someone that is seeking, that wants to learn, that is trying to understand the world he's in. And to me, like you're saying, as far as repentance or like tshuva is right, is very much like lashuv. So you're right that your grandfather really did that first move of coming back to the land. So, you're all good in my book. Invite people. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, you are. I had a similar feeling that after I started to read the Torah and went to classes, I also went to the synagogue like a couple of times a week and every Saturday. And it never, maybe I did it wrong, but this experience never gave me the same feeling of depth and being close to God, like reading the Torah to my daughter at home. You know what I mean? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, then we have another prophet, John Verveke, and he taught us about the 4 ways of knowing.
The 4 P's.
The 4 P's. The action of reading the Torah is a completely different way of knowing than knowing the text. The actual verbal reading is on another level than getting to know the text.
I would recommend on a very practical level, Ron. There's a series by Amalia Amarusi. It's called Haparasha. It's for kids. There's a picture over there that I love of it goes about every parasha. It has all the 5 books. Amila Marusi, I think. And the way they show Moses talking to God or Abraham sort of searching and trying to understand God is it's not like a man with a beard and a hand coming out from the sky saying, you do this. You see this little boy sort of sketching the moon and butterflies and trying to understand nature. And it's I would say it's a lot more palpable, I think, in today's day and age. So I would definitely recommend that. And if you're learning the Tanya, there's a comic book called Derech Aruka Tzara. It's like 4 series, and it's a comic book. My kids have it. It's a comic book for kids about the Tanya. And it's this kid that he has like his nefesh behemit with him as well. And he has to go through all these different like things that he goes through in life. Now, again, I would say tread carefully. It was a kaved midai, you definitely don't want to push it. There's very much the idea of chanoch atanar lefi darko. You don't want to push someone on and be like, oh, you have to do these 5 books. Someone might connect a different way. And throughout your own journey, you might feel like you want to be. We can't avoid indoctrinating our kids. That's like the game we're playing. That's the operating system like we're giving them. But so you're sort of taking something on that's new, and now you're also doing that, let's say, with your kid. So,
well, I after I discovered what happened in schools regarding progressivism and all of this stupid stuff and disgusting stuff.
Yeah.
I took my little girl and I put her in mamlachti dati.
Oh, wow.
And she's teaching me now. we studied together at the Parashat Hashavua for the first time together, and for both of us, for me it's not always, but sometimes it's the first time for both of us reading this text. And she learned Gemara in school, and she learned the stuff and Mishnah and all the stuff, and she gave me did you know that Jacob and she tell me a story from deep inside the Pardes.
Yeah,
and
it was always said of Israel, it's the place where the mother learns the mother language from the child.
Again?
Israel is the place where the mother learns the mother language from the child.
Wow, that's who said that?
But Russian immigrants. How would
right.
elderly Russian immigrant ever learn this language Hebrew? Because the kids talk it.
Wow.
So they teach their mother, and the mother try to teach her mother.
That's a strong note for me to end. That's a good one.
I want to emphasize, because it's an article. It's science. It's not faith. You ought to be reading the Bible aloud, like in synagogue. You just
okay.
It's and then being in Israel, you get the 3rd P, because you have the right perspective, and sending your kid to the right school, you have the right participation. So you're perfect. You're the 5 Ps.
4 P.
You have the 5th P of being perfect.
Wow, nice. You know what? I never thought of that. You know what?
This is why you should learn Verveki as well.
John Verveki, yeah. I would recommend John Verveki. I would just say like this before we close this. I added to the comments. If you look at the comments, I added the Discord link, so you could connect to the Discord through that. I also added the YouTube channel of this guy named Jacob. So if you subscribe to him, you could see a lot of the Mesilat Yesharim, the Rambam classes, these classes. They're also there as well.
And what is the Discord? I see a lot. Rendos United, the live.
Yeah, it's just because you see it 3 times because it's streaming on 3 different channels right now.
Oh, okay, got it.
So mine is called the Young Levite. If you want to, you could go on that. I give like weekly Divrei Torah, also like about the parasha. And lastly, I would say there's a book I added over here called Shmei Kedem, Bereshit Aleph. So Rav Shirky is writing a pirush on all the Torah. Right now, he finished his first book, which is it's in Sefer Bereshit, from Parashat Bereshit ad Vayera, right? So it's still, but he goes through each pasuk, and there again, if you want, again, I would recommend definitely reading that because that will blow your mind.
Okay, I think I will.
All right,
Okay.
Ron, this was fantastic. I hope you and the family have a Shabbat Shalom. Yoav, you too. I will see you around the corner. And Ron, welcome and nitre.
Thank you, Av. I'll see you again. Thank you, Chezi.
My pleasure. Yalla. Bye.
Bye.
Pow. Oh, what a nice guy. What a beautiful, beautiful moment. As a kef. Mm-hmm.